Things that a morally normal, even if very morally average or mediocre person would not unprompted do. For example, hold down their daughter at the age of 6, tear off her underwear, and cut her genitalia with a sharp stone. They wouldn't do that if they didn't think God was telling them to do it.
Rabbi, I suppose you've heard this question before. I think it's for the panel. Why do good things happen to bad people?
Why do bad people get away with murder? I have lost track of how many people have urged me to write a book by that title. And my response is, who would buy it? Who would you give it as a present to?
Well, it's too late for Mr. Madoff now, but he would have liked it a year ago.
I would say bottom line is, yeah, it's a very disturbing phenomenon. Most of the time, I think, you don't really get away with anything in this world. You pay for everything you take in this world in one currency or another. The Bernard Madoffs, even if he had not been caught, would have missed out on much of what it means to be a human being. The guy who cheats on his wife and doesn't get caught and thinks he's really clever and he's pulled it off will never know what it really feels like to invest all of your love in a single relationship. You pay for everything you take in life in one currency or another, and sometimes when the bill comes due, you go back and wish you'd played it differently.
Professor, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
I once said that the rabbi had given me a wonderful definition of the word envy. I envied his royalties. And there was a sense in which he spoke, and does speak, to the fundamental question that we all ask. But I would write a slightly different book. My book would be, why do good people do wicked things? And the church is full of good people who are tempted and actually sometimes succeed in doing wicked things. Now, my tradition teaches that there's the doctrine of original sin. It sort of explains everything. You're all naturally wicked, and you'll do wicked things unless you're inhibited against them, which provides a very rational theology, but wouldn't preach very well these days, especially, I'm sure, in Hartford, Connecticut. But the fact of the matter is, the greater question for me is people who want to do the right thing, want to be thought of as good and virtuous, often end up doing terrible things. And I think of St. Paul's famous line, the good that I would do, that I do not, and that which I would not do, that I do. That's the human and the moral dilemma. And it seems to me that's the task to which, confession, forgiveness, amendment of life, all of that is directed towards. So that would be my take, but I don't think my book would do as well as Rabbi's book.
Do you want to add anything?
Yeah.
When people ask, why do good things happen to bad people? They're really noticing that the world isn't fair. And that's true. Nature isn't moral, it's neutral. Earthquakes, disease, and luck don't target people based on virtue. The rabbi's answer, that everyone pays in some unseen way, sounds comforting, but there's no evidence for it. Studies on happiness and longevity show that dishonest or immoral people don't always suffer inside. Many live long, successful lives. Justice systems exist because life doesn't balance itself out. Then the Reverend brings up original sin, saying humans are naturally wicked. But science paints a different picture. Infants as young as 6 months show empathy and fairness in experiments, suggesting morality is innate, not divine. The idea that we're born broken was created to make sense of suffering in a world run by a supposedly loving God. Yet if that God allows pain and evil anyway, it raises a bigger question. Is he unwilling or unable to stop it?
Things that a morally normal, even if very morally average or mediocre person would not, unprompted, do, for example, hold down their daughter at the age of 6, tear off her underwear, and cut her genitalia with a sharp stone. They wouldn't do that if they didn't think God was telling them to do it, or the mullahs, or if it's a boy, the rabbis weren't telling them to do it. One of the reasons why I have the lurid subtitle I do of my book, that Religion is a Poison, is that it makes ordinary moral people, compels them, forces them, in some cases orders them, to do disgusting, wicked, unforgivable things. There's no expiation for the generations of misery and suffering that religion has inflicted in this way and continues to inflict, and I still haven't heard enough apology for it.
Rabbi, you want to do that?
Christopher, I've got to call you down on referring to circumcision as genital mutilation. My son cried more at his first haircut than he did at his bris. And statistically...
You weren't doing it right then.
Statistically, the only long-term effect that it seems to have on people is it increases their chances of winning a Nobel Prize.
I can't find the compulsory mutilation of the genitals of children a subject for humor in that way, or flippancy in that way. Maimonides says very plainly that it's designed to repress sexual pleasure, to deprive a male child as far as possible of the opportunity of that. The full excision, not just the snip or the full mandatory covenant is fantastically painful, leads to trauma, leads to the dulling of the sexual relationship, and can be in itself life-threatening at that moment. We have the records, I can show them to you, of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds in the United States, boy babies who've died or had life-threatening infections as a result of this disgusting practice. That a person as humane as yourself can sit here and think of that as a fit subject for humor shows what I mean. Religion makes morally normal people say and do disgusting and wicked things, and you've just proved my point for me. Shame on you for saying what you just said. Shame on you for saying it about your own son, my God.
Let's move on.
Yes, let's.
What next? Cutting the labia of little girls. At least Judaism doesn't do that.
This is a question.
What if a Muslim was to say to you just now, my little girl cried more at her first haircut than when I cut off her clitoris? What would you think of me if I was to say such a disgusting thing?
Well,
remember, we are not talking about detail here. We're talking about whether religion makes people behave better or not.
let's give the rabbi a chance. I wanted to move on, but let's give the rabbi a chance to respond to what you said, because it got pretty personal here. So,
again, my experience in my own son, my own grandson, hundreds of congregants, has been that it's not nothing like what you're talking about, and that for whatever reason that this has become an issue for you, I just think is excessive.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
That I'm more personally...
There's an undertone of innuendo to this. Let's bring it on.
No, there's no innuendo there. What I'm saying is,
sure.
I've lived through this personally, and...
You've inflicted it, is what you're saying.
I've been what?
You've inflicted it, or officiated at it, is what you're saying, isn't it?
Well, officiated, yes. Inflicted, no. Forget Maimonides. Maimonides has his hang-ups about that.
I should forget Maimonides. Since when do you say that?
Because on issues of sexuality, Maimonides has some very medieval ideas. I ran across the line in your book that Orthodox Jews have sex through a hole in a bedsheet. Do you know Orthodox Jews who told you they have sex that way?
No. I say it is said of Orthodox Jews that they may do that.
all right, gentlemen, I'm sorry to break this up.
That's a Reformed Jewish rumor about Orthodox.
We have a lot of questions from the audience, and I want to give others a chance.
Genital mutilation is no joke.
What Hitchens says here cuts straight to the core of why faith-based morality can be dangerous. He's pointing out that a normal, decent person would never harm a child, unless they believed a God told them to. And he's right. Across history, we've seen religion justify acts that would otherwise be seen as horrific, from genital mutilation and stoning to witch trials and holy wars. People think they're serving God, but they're actually surrendering their own moral judgment. Take circumcision. The rabbi tries to laugh it off, but Data from medical journals like Pediatrics and the Journal of Urology document hundreds of infant injuries and even deaths linked to religious circumcisions, especially when done outside medical settings. Maimonides, one of Judaism's most respected scholars, even admitted the practice was designed to dull sexual pleasure, not for hygiene, but to suppress desire. That's control, not compassion.
Which kind of Christian you had to be in order to be a real one. These are not small distinctions, and people invoke them as strongly as they will invoke the idea that there's a God or a Christ or a Messiah in the first place. I don't believe the rabbi really thinks it doesn't matter if someone is Buddhist or Jewish. I don't believe he's got to that ecumenical stage. I don't believe he does. If he does, he's in a very small minority in his community. I think these things must be taken seriously. Now, you asked me, and it's a joke question, do I think I'm going to paradise? Of course not. I wouldn't go if I was asked. I don't want to live in some fucking celestial North Korea, for one thing, where all I get to do is praise the dear leader from dawn till dusk. I don't want this. It would be hell for me. So let's get that clear. But when Rick Warren, who's invited to give the inauguration of an elected constitutional president of these United States, was asked in Colorado the other day by a Jewish woman, "Can I come to your paradise?" He says, "No." Well, screw him. And don't let's say that this is a nothing distinction. The trouble with religion only starts when people have affirmed that it's true. It only begins then. Then becomes the really nice bit. Interreligious warfare. That's the really agreeable part.
The rabbi talks about religions listening to each other, but history shows the opposite. Christians once burned other Christians for translating the same Bible differently. The 30 Years' War wiped out millions across Europe over what kind of Christian you were. And even today, believers still divide over who's saved. Catholics say salvation is through their church. Many Protestants say Catholics aren't real Christians at all. Hitchens is right. Once people claim to know God's absolute truth, peace becomes impossible. The Bible itself shows how exclusive religion can be. John 14:6. No one comes to the Father except through me. That verse alone has justified centuries of exclusion and persecution. When Hitchens compares heaven to a celestial North Korea, he's not mocking belief. He's describing a dictatorship of the mind where questioning is forbidden and worship never ends. Real morality doesn't come from submission. It comes from freedom, from learning, empathy, and responsibility for our own actions. Humanity moves forward not by obedience, but by thinking for ourselves.
Why is religion so often associated with killing, wars, etc.? This is from Bill.
Well, Bill, religious people who engage in killing, war, and violence believe they are carrying out the dictates of their God. And so they are justified in doing whatever it is that they do. And there's a certain rational understanding of that, but it's also contrary in many ways to the heart of most of the religious traditions, that we are not God. We do not do what God does. And if God does that, then that's God's business, not ours. That's where the modesty bit comes in. And that's what makes of Christianity such a powerful and compelling witness against which so much of our tradition has gone. Christianity doesn't tell you to go out and kill people and do all these terrible things in the name of Jesus. In fact, it says quite the opposite. But that's what we do. And that's why we have to be taught. And that's why we have to confess. And that's why we have to be transformed.
Rabbi, you were motioning.
Yeah, Peter, I think maybe it works the other way around. It's not that religious people go out and kill and carry on wars. It's that people kill and carry on wars. And at some basic human level, they intuit that what they're doing is wrong. And so they look for the veneer of religion to cover it and justify what they are doing. They are kidnapping and misusing religion to excuse what they recognize as misbehavior.
Wouldn't that be exactly the other way around if we take the best known territorial and ethnic and theological quarrel presently in the world, the Israel-Palestine dispute? There we have a small territory about the size of Wales, the other end of the Mediterranean. There are roughly as many Palestinian Arabs, Christian and Muslim, mainly more Muslim now than there were, as there are Israeli Jews. It's a very long-standing territorial dispute that's inherited by us from the League of Nations mandate. It's the oldest territorial quarrel on the international agenda. Everybody knows what the solution is. Two peoples, roughly equivalent claims to a parcel of land, and they're roughly the same population proportion. Something like a partition, something like a two-state solution, some version of that, is what is voted for by the international community, the European Union, the UN, the US, almost all American Jews, I think I can say, certainly the majority of Israeli Jews, more grudgingly by the majority of Palestinians, by several neighboring Arab states and so forth. This is obvious. The alternatives are too horrible to contemplate it. Why can't we get it? Why can we not get it? Because the parties of God have a veto on the process. Small, true, but they are not baptizing retrospectively their crimes in the name of God. They're committing the original crimes as a divine mandate. They're saying, no, no, no. No one has the right to live here but us. God gave us this territory. It is holy land. Our God gives it all to us. It's exactly the opposite of what the rabbi just said. And we're all going to go to hell on a sled with this war, which is now I think, being made insoluble and incurable as a dispute.
Christopher, I would remind you... If you think it's
bad now, you wait and see how bad it is, because the parties of God are in charge. And that means civilization is going to be challenged.
I would remind you that at Taba in 2001, the Israeli government was prepared to sign on to a two-state solution. And Arafat refused to go along with it.
What if it meant kicking the Mess Zionists out of the West Bank?
I have a final question for you. I'd like to start with you, Christopher Hitchens. I'm wondering...
Surely I've said enough. Who doesn't think that?
What keeps you up at night? And what gives you hope?
I'm certainly not going to tell you the first. And as for hope, I'm a great believer in the uses of pessimism. Once you've worked out that you are born into a losing struggle, and you don't take false consolation, and you're not happy clappy, the sky can suddenly clear for a bit.
Rabbi, what keeps you up at night, and what gives you hope?
Never quite sure what keeps me up at night. I'll tell you what gives me hope. Very often the question is phrased to me in terms of, do you think human beings are getting better or getting worse? And my answer is yes. I think in some ways we're getting better, in some ways we're getting worse. And I perceive a glacial but perceptible increase in human goodness. Behavior which was acceptable in wars generations ago is now at least controversial, if not forbidden. 19th century novels, is there a Dickens novel which doesn't have the death of children in every other chapter? That was taken as part of life. 21st century, the death of a child is a shattering tragedy. Behavior which we tolerated not that long ago is at least embarrassing and very often just proscribed. So I think we are slowly coming closer to the image of what the fully realized human being is going to be. And that gives me hope.
Professor?
What keeps me up at night from time to time, not every night, but from time to time, is the terrible fear that we will think we're so clever that we'll blow ourselves up. And I think that the nuclear button is a real terrifying existential dilemma. And the more of those nuclear buttons out there, the more I worry that some idiot in some position of authority will do it. And life as we know it will end. I do worry about that because I have very little confidence in the people who have the ultimate responsibility, no matter what country they're in, to prevent that from happening. What gives me hope is the ultimate conviction, the long-term conviction that human beings will come to their senses, and that is to say that there will be a desire to live out the highest aspirations of one's religious faith, and not simply the cultural or the minimal ones. I follow the philosopher, the mid-20th century, early 20th century, who was fond of saying that he was a short-term pessimist, but a long-term optimist. In the long run, he believed it would turn out all right. In the short run, people will do nasty and wicked things. And we just have to sort of get through that in order to get to that brighter thing. If I didn't have that hope, I don't think I would be a minister.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
When Hitchens takes on the question of religion and war, he exposes something most people are afraid to admit. Faith doesn't just justify violence, it often causes it. He brings up Israel and Palestine as a perfect example. Both sides know what peace looks like, yet they can't reach it because each believes God gave them the land. The result is endless conflict, where killing becomes sacred duty. History repeats this pattern. The Crusades, the Inquisition, the partition of India, even 9/11. Every time people claim divine permission to do what reason and empathy would forbid. The Bible itself is filled with commands of war, from Joshua's conquest of Canaan to God ordering Saul to destroy the Amalekites, including women and children. When you believe your orders come from heaven, there's no limit to what you'll justify on earth. That's Hitchens' warning. When the parties of God take charge, civilization steps backward. Real progress comes not from faith, but from skepticism, science, and human rights, the tools that hold even our own beliefs accountable. So let me ask you, do you think humanity can ever find peace while religion still claims moral authority over violence? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more thought-provoking discussions.
Unbaptized children don't go there forever in isolation and loneliness, after all, because they didn't get the sprinkle of water. You can relax. No, you can't. Millions of parents thought that's where their dead children have gone, ladies and gentlemen, for hundreds of years. Miserable, frightened, humiliated, upset. They believed it. It was real to them. It was cruel to tell them this nonsense to begin with. It's even more cruel to say, after all, that it's not true, but never mind. After hundreds of years of that, we have to apologize for a few other things too. The Inquisition, sorry about that. The role of the church in the final solution, maybe a mistake. The Crusades, no, we wouldn't do it the same way now. The massacre of Byzantine and Eastern Orthodox Christians, up till the very recent past in the Balkans, we owe them an apology. There's quite a lot to be taking on, isn't it? But never mind, we're getting ready to be infallible all over again. This stuff is not to be believed. What's the worldview of the dog? The dog is given by you food, shelter, water, love, affection, and it thinks you're God. The cat is given food, warmth, shelter, love, by it thinks it's God. Religion makes the following appeal to us, which is why I say it poisons everything, because it goes to the deep nature of our self-respect and our humanity and our integrity. It makes the following bid to us. It says, you are born sinful. You're born guilty. You're guilty of crimes that were committed before you were born. You are not able to evade them. Your sin is original. You're made from dust, or in the Quran, from a clot of blood. Your Creator is not in a very good mood with you, and there's no reason why he should be, given what piece of excrement you basically are. That's the masochistic element of it. But
after this thoroughgoing abjection, thoroughgoing demand that you throw aside all your self-respect, you're told there is, however, some redeeming news. The universe is designed with you in mind. The cosmos cares what happens to you. And if you will continue to abject yourself like a serf in front of God, you may hope for the forgiveness of sins, for eternal life, and for a divine plan. In other words, the maximum appeal to the abject, to the servile in you, and the maximum appeal to the self-centered and the egomaniac. Not a very wholesome way to begin a discussion about the main questions, such as why are we here? Who are we? What are we here for? What is the just city? How would it look like? What is the meaning of life? It's begun by a horrible lecture from a dictator. And you're then further told that if you do not bow the knee to a celestial dictatorship, unalterable, unchangeable, unappealable to, if you don't believe in that, you would have no means of telling right from wrong. How would you know how to do the right thing or avoid the wrong if you were not being told by a celestial dictatorship? Once again, an absolutely central attack on any concept that we might have of our own integrity, dignity, and self-respect. How would Huck Finn know? Admittedly, he's a fictional character, but then, so most of the people I'm going to be discussing, from Moses onwards. How does Huck Finn know that he's not to betray his friend Jim? He's not to give him back. He's not to give him up to the people who are hunting for him. How does Mark Twain know that we will like Huck when he refuses this? What does Huck know? The law is against him. The church is against him. All the preachments of religion and customary law are against him. He thinks that if he refuses the demand to give up his slave friend, he's going to go straight to hell. That's what he thinks, but he still does the right thing. As we might all hope to do, as we must all hope to do, if we were tested much less than that. It's innate in us. Religion gets its morals from us. We know what the right thing is without being told by a celestial dictatorship. If it were otherwise, this is why I say I'm an anti-theist, not an atheist. If it were otherwise, what would the situation be? Every one of our waking and sleeping thoughts would be under permanent surveillance at all times from the moment of our conception, according to some at any rate, certainly birth, until not just when we died, because that's when the real fun would begin. Now, it's as if those who wish it to be true, which I do not, you can be an atheist and wish that there was a God. Many atheists I know do wish it was true. Why do I not? Because I don't want to live in the celestial North Korea. I'm one of the few people who's been to, as a writer, to North Korea and Iran and Iraq too, to all the axis of evil countries in the last few years. When I was young and was told that this is what paradise will be like, you get to praise God all the time, forever, and continue thanking him for everything he's doing for you, sometimes with the aid of musical instruments. But that's the thing, that's what paradise will be like, everlasting praise. I used to think, sounds like hell to me. But I also wondered, what would it be like? I couldn't quite picture it. An attempt is made in the movie Bedazzled, the first version, to try and convey how ghastly it would be. Well, now I know. I've been to a state where there's worship from dawn till dusk and thanking for everything you've got, every tiny crumb. And there's what you get, too, is the tiny crumb. Nothing but thanks, nothing but praise. It's a state where, not everybody knows this, Kim Jong-il is not the absolute dictator of North Korea. He's only the head of the party and of the North Korean army. The head of the state, the president, is his late father, who's been dead for some 15 years, Kim Il-sung. He's still the president, and he's the president, if you pardon the expression, for life, even though he's, as it were, passed on, ceased to be, joined the choir in vestibule, turned up his toes. He's an ex-president. You could call it a necrocracy, a thanatocracy, a mausolocracy. And it's also, you'll notice, just one short of a trinity, because the Son is the reincarnation of the Father. That's what it would be like if this horrible Bronze Age Palestinian myth was true. Unending, eternal, unchallengeable, unchangeable slavery. Who wants it to be true? That's my first question to myself. I'll answer it later. And to you, since I haven't got a debate partner, and to you, ladies and gentlemen, why would anyone want it to be true? If I don't remember to ask myself, isn't secular dictatorship sometimes just as bad? If I don't remember to ask myself this, promise me one of you will, because we can't skip that point. Okay. Why is it wonderful to be here in Seattle and in North America having this discussion at this moment? Because everybody in America believes that everybody else is a strong believer. Everybody believes the opinion polls that say everyone else goes to church and believes in Satan more than they believe in Darwin. Everyone else thinks you can't run for office unless you bow the knee. And this is not true, and your presence here partly materializes my belief that it isn't, as did my swing through the South, where thousands of people came to each stop and all looked around themselves thinking, God, I thought I was the only atheist in this town till I got here. We had to move out of the bookstore in North Carolina into a church to fill up the overspurns. And the pastor said to me, he said, I shouldn't be telling you this. This made my day, he said, I shouldn't be telling you this. This damn church has never been this full. And North Carolina can be a hard row to hoe for an unbeliever, I'm here to tell you, but it's not that tough. Well, I thought, because the Lord sent me the death of Jerry Falwell that week.
When Hitchens points out that religion begins by telling us we're born guilty, he's right. The doctrine of original sin comes straight from Augustine in the 4th century, not from Jesus himself. Even Paul's letters in Romans 5:12 were stretched later to mean all humans inherit Adam's guilt. That means Christianity built much of its foundation on a man-made interpretation, not divine truth. Science also shows morality doesn't come from a celestial dictator. Evolutionary biology explains empathy and cooperation as survival traits. Franz de Waal's studies on primates show chimpanzees comfort the distressed and share food without any concept of God or sin. Morality is in our biology. History proves the same. Societies like ancient China and India developed moral codes, Confucian ethics, Buddhist compassion, completely separate from Christianity. They didn't need the Bible to know murder or theft was wrong. Even the Bible undercuts its own claim. In Genesis 3, Adam and Eve are punished for seeking knowledge, not for committing an actual crime. And in Exodus, God orders genocide against whole peoples, including children. If morality comes from God, why does his law so often conflict with our innate sense of justice?
Turn a page of your newspaper any day you like. See what the parties of God are doing to Iraqi society to drag it down to the level of Afghanistan or Somalia, the last two countries where the parties of God had it all their own way. Look next door to Iran, where people who believe in a tooth fairy figure called the hidden Imam, the 12th Imam, whose immediate advent is expected, which will, it won't surprise you to hear, bring about a reign of universal peace and justice when it comes. Wonder where they picked up that idea. But perhaps as a sign of a lack of confidence in this belief, Mr. Ahmadinejad is currently building a new boulevard into the center of Tehran on which to welcome the motorcade of this Imam when he returns from his excursion. Just in case that doesn't work or doesn't happen, why not pirate and plagiarize some nuclear weapons? They know nothing about science themselves. They couldn't do physics. They don't care about the beauties of science. They don't, the wonders of the cosmos don't appeal to them at all. But they can probably steal, or have stolen, the ingredients to make a nuclear weapon. So we now have what we've long feared we're going to have, the coincidence between an apocalyptic ideology and, or rather, shall I say, a messianic ideology and an apocalyptic weapon. It's going to happen now. It'll happen very soon. Well, suck on that for a second. I've already said what the crazed messianic settlers in the neighboring or not far off West Bank are doing, and who their best friends in America are, the Falwellites and Robertson clones, who think it's amusing to try and propose that, with the help of sources I've gathered in Washington state, that stultifying nonsense be taught to our children in American schools in the year 2007 as equal time. So, hey kids, the chemistry class is over, now get ready for the alchemy period. Astronomy's over, you'll be glad to hear. It's a hard subject, but cheer up. After the break, astrology teacher will be on the scene. What is this nonsense? How can anyone put up with it for a single second? The evil attempt to make children ignorant and frightened. That is also augmented very strongly by another priesthood, which has been teaching them about hellfire and limbo, though they've just dropped limbo at the last minute. As the Pope did recently notice, limbo's over now. Unbaptized children don't go there forever in isolation and loneliness, after all, because they didn't get the sprinkle of water. You can relax. No, you can't. Millions of parents thought that's where their dead children had gone, ladies and gentlemen, for hundreds of years. Miserable, frightened, humiliated, upset. They believed it. It was real to them. It was cruel to tell them this nonsense to begin with. It's even more cruel to say, after all, that it's not true, but never mind. After hundreds of years of that, we have to apologize for a few other things too. The Inquisition, sorry about that. The role of the church in the final solution, maybe a mistake. The Crusades, no, we wouldn't do it the same way now. The massacre of Byzantine and Eastern Orthodox Christians, up till the very recent past in the Balkans, we owe them an apology. There's quite a lot to be taking on, isn't it? But never mind, we're getting ready to be infallible all over again. This stuff is not to be believed. And you live in a country where you don't have to, and mustn't be intimidated by the supposed strength of illusions like this, or the people who peddle them. Where I was very kind to mention that I recently took my oath as an American citizen at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. Actually, it was on the 13th of April, which is his birthday and also mine. And I'm in a small way his biographer, and I was able to arrange to take the oath at the tidal basin by his memorial. And I made a little speech about the Virginia Statute on Religious Freedom, which is the basis of the tremendous First Amendment to our Constitution, that guarantees, as you know, that there can be no clerical meddling in our public and political life. And the shorthand phrase for that was uttered by the president in a letter that he wrote to the Baptists of Danbury, Connecticut, seeking refuge from persecution. From the Congregationalists of Danbury, Connecticut, by the way, it's who they were afraid of, in which he said there will be a wall of separation forever on this point. So I now have a new slogan for you. Mr. Jefferson, build up that wall. And I believe it's entirely possible that we can construct a cement here between what is patriotic, what is decent, what is rational, and what is not faith-based. I think it can be done, and I think it can start here. Okay. Enough from me. What about my debating partner? What has he got to say to this? Well, how would you be, Mr. Hitchens, how would you be moral if it wasn't for God? How would you know what morality was? What's your warrant for saying what's right and wrong? I always politely pause at this point as if I've never heard this nonsense before. Okay, so I am wrong when I get a sense of satisfaction from giving a pint of blood. It comes from nowhere. I don't lose the pint. I get it back after a cup of tea and I lie down, but someone else gets a pint of blood they may very well need. A great little transaction. I don't do enough of it. And I have a rare blood group myself, and I might one day want the same person, or someone else rather, to do the same for me. But it's not just a utilitarian transaction. I positively enjoy doing it. Is this from nowhere? I certainly don't know of any heavenly reason I think yet. All right, if that's not good enough for you. By the way, give blood whenever you can. It's a noble thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And you may need some blood one day yourself, and you shouldn't be ashamed of the fact that this comes from human solidarity, without which we wouldn't be here in the first place or able to have a language to discuss this in. But all right. Think of my Jewish ancestors, such as they were, hobbling around in the desert. I don't believe a word of the story. Even Israeli archaeology has completely and conclusively disproved the story of Exodus, as is detailed at some length in my book. There was no such presence in Egypt. There was no exile. There was no wandering. There was a lot of massacre and murder and theft, but then there always is when religious tribes are walking around. Let's assume the story is true. Let's assume it. Am I to be insulted by being told that my ancestors did not know until they got to Sinai that perjury and murder and theft were not kosher. Up till then, they thought those are the things we like best. It's a bit of a facer to get all this way and then to have someone tell us that's not on anymore. No, we all have to, I'll repeat myself, we all have to have more self-respect than that. They wouldn't have got that far or anywhere. They would never have been written about or heard of if they'd been under any other impression. Religion gets its morality from us. We know innately. You don't have to teach a child the golden rule. You sometimes have to reinforce it a bit, but you don't have to teach the principles.
Hitchens is right to warn about Iran's hidden imam. Messianic cults always end in bloodshed. The Taiping Rebellion in China killed over 20 million when a man claimed to be Christ's brother. Now imagine that same mindset with nuclear weapons. A dangerous mix of prophecy and apocalyptic technology. He's also correct about religion sabotaging science. The 2005 Dover trial proved intelligent design was theology, not science. Putting astrology beside astronomy or alchemy beside chemistry doesn't teach balance. It cripples education. Data shows states with weaker science standards score far worse in STEM. The Catholic reversal on limbo in 2007 is another example. For centuries, parents were told their unbaptized children suffered forever, then suddenly, never mind. That isn't divine wisdom. It's cruelty. The same goes for the Inquisition, Crusades, Holocaust silence, and Balkan massacres. Endless apologies from an infallible institution. Jefferson understood this. That's why he demanded a wall of separation between church and state. History shows it's the only safeguard against clerical power poisoning politics. And morality? We don't need God for that. Neuroscience proves empathy is hardwired in the brain. Anthropology shows cooperation and fairness existed in tribes long before Scripture. Even the Bible admits it. In Genesis 20, the pagan king knows lying and adultery are wrong while Abraham deceives. Morality comes from human solidarity, not from God. Religion only claimed the credit after the fact, and often corrupted it.
Same with the New Testament. How do we know this? Because the story of the Good Samaritan is told by the alleged Nazarene in whose existence I also do not believe. But he talks of a person who went out of his way on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho to help a fellow creature in need. Very obviously, this man cannot have been a Christian because it's the young Jesus talking about it. He knows the story already. He's able to tell people that's the way you should behave if you see people in trouble. He never says you need divine permission to do this or a divine warrant to do it. It's ordinary human ethics. And to say that it wouldn't be part of us, part of our warp and our weft and our woof, if it wasn't for divine permission, is to make ourselves into serfs. So I propose we repudiate that and, as it were, stand on our own 2 feet a bit more. Now, speaking of serfdom, well, Mr. Hitchens, isn't it the case that in the last century, some of the worst atrocities, if not the worst of all, were perpetrated by atheists and secularists? Is this not the fact? Very serious question. I have a whole chapter about it in my book. Shall I read it all to you? No, I won't do that. It's available at fine bookstores everywhere. And will be available after this show, where I'll be very polite to anyone who has a receipt, but not to anyone else. Someone asked me the other day, "Are you a materialist?" I said, "Are you joking? Yes. This is America." Well, take the cases that are before us, the most notorious ones. In the case of fascism, the movement that coined the term totalitarianism, that actually put it into circulation. Religion being, in my view, implicitly totalitarian with its admiration of an absolute, unchallengeable ruler. There's no other way to describe the fascist movement, beginning in Spain, Portugal, Italy, spreading through Croatia, Austria, large parts of Germany, Hungary, Slovakia, except to say it was a movement of the Roman Catholic Rite. That's what it was. It was a completely Christian movement. All of its leaders were believing Christians. It had an official concordat with the Vatican. The Nazi puppet state leader of Slovakia was actually a man in holy orders. General Franco was very nearly baptized in his rule by that. Anyone can look this up. The church has never ceased to apologize for it, and nor should it. And after the war was over, they helped many of these people escape and begin constructing regimes of a similar model in South America after 1945. No wonder they can't stop apologizing. Nothing secular about that. German National Socialism, not quite the same, I have to say. It's true that the Vatican signed a treaty with Hitler the week he was installed in power. And it was for him the first and most important treaty he ever signed, the Concordat with the Vatican, and neither of them ever broke it. It's also true to say that in Mein Kampf he praises the Catholic Church and never left it, and has nothing but contempt for atheism. It's also true that the Pope ordered that his birthday, the Führer's birthday, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, be celebrated from the pulpit every year, every April, which it was, to the very end. It's also true that 25% of the members of the SS, this we know from Catholic historians, were confessing Catholics, ones who went to confession, and that no one was ever threatened with excommunication for their role in the Endlösung, as the Germans call the Shoah, or the final solution. The excommunication was only used by the church politically after the war, when you were told you'd be excommunicated if you voted for the Communist Party. And it is true that Joseph Goebbels was excommunicated from the Catholic Church. But do you want to know why? Do you know why? He's married a Protestant. Married a Protestant. That's what it took to be. Next, you'll know he didn't eat fish on a Friday or something. No, excuse me, they have their standards, okay? But it is also true that Hitler sought to replace Christianity as the state religion and would have preferred an Aryan Nordic blood myth with himself as the centerpiece of it. There's no question about that. And that many brave Christians had to die on that proposition. No one can deny that. But there's nothing secular about National Socialism. And of the third partner in that revolting alliance, that of Japan, the leader is not just a man of God, but a God himself, for whom people were prepared to immolate themselves and others. The late Emperor Hirohito. While I'm at it, when his son was sent to Oxford University, this is a digression, but why not? He was sent to Magdalen College in the 30s, and the Japanese embassy sent up a team of people to see the warden of Magdalen College, Oxford. Are you sure you're ready to receive the Crown Prince? They said, yeah, we're ready. He's got a nice room. We have a good tutor. Apparently his English is very good. We're looking forward very much to having him at the Japanese embassy. Well, it's just we want to be sure you understand. You're calling him Crown Prince. Of course, that is his title, but you do realize that his father in our country is not thought of just as an emperor, but as God. Do you understand that? The warden of Magdalen College said, I think you'll find we're quite used to having the sons of famous people at Oxford. Anyway, don't know what brought that on. Don't know quite what made me go to that discussion. Anyway, there's nothing secular about an empire whose military ideology, by the way, was that of Zen Buddhism, for those of you who think the Eastern path is more contemplative. Its official ideology, as with the dictatorship in Burma today, is Zen Buddhism. There's nothing secular about that. So I think that clears up this frequently asked question on that side of the ledger.
Hitchens ends by exposing a tired but dishonest argument that atheists caused the worst atrocities of the 20th century. But history doesn't back this up. Fascism? Rooted in Christian nationalism. Franco, Salazar, and Mussolini were all devout Catholics backed by the Vatican. Hitler's regime signed a concordat with the Catholic Church in 1933, his first international agreement, and he remained a baptized Catholic until death. Even worse, the Church never excommunicated any Nazi for their role in the Holocaust, but Goebbels was excommunicated for marrying a Protestant. 25% of SS members were practicing Catholics, according to Catholic historians, and the Church helped many escape to South America after the war through the rat lines, with full Vatican cooperation. And Japan? Not atheist either. Its emperor was literally worshipped as a living god, and its military was infused with Zen Buddhist ideology, not secular values. These regimes weren't atheist. They were authoritarian theocracies or cults of divine leadership, no different from the religious despotisms they mirrored. As for morality, Hitchens points to the Good Samaritan, someone who helped a stranger not out of obedience to a god, but out of basic human decency. That story itself, told by Jesus, proves morality predates Christianity. You don't need divine command to know that helping someone in need is right. Now it's your turn. Do you believe religion is the source of morality, or is it something deeper, something human? Let us know in the comments below. Like this breakdown? Give it a thumbs up. Join the conversation. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into reason, history, and ideas that matter.
Second, that it seems to deal in absolutes, that it appears to want us to think of a God who is in some way or another a dictator in this world, and if this one should prove disappointing, I think you used the word dress rehearsal, the term dress rehearsal, a mere anteroom. If you think this is unfair, if you think this is discrepant, if you think this is irrational, why do the evil prosper? Why do the good get trampled underfoot and left behind? Never mind. Once you've squeezed with agony through the keyhole of death, there's another whole world where all that will be put right, where every tear will be dried and every injustice compensated, which, if it was true, would be a terrible exercise in sadomasochism. Why put a bunch of rats into a labyrinth of torture? See how they do, surprise them with new rules, even bigger surprise when you squeeze them through that last gap. Now we have you, and now you're due for a verdict against which there is no appeal. The incremental effort of a lot of steady work that some of us have been putting in to dispel illusions in the supernatural, and in a private belief that I've held for a long time, which is that very many of the practitioners of these faiths don't believe it either. And perhaps that might be the first consolation that we take away from this evening's discussion. My own task having been so much lightened, even though I retain the tiny suspicion, and I hope it's an ignoble one, that Rabbi Shmuley might possibly be going easy on me. And that would be a great cause of resentment. If I thought for a second that that was true, it's already bad enough that I'm the fifth person appearing on this stage, and you may have noticed the steady decline in the standard of pulchritude that went on after number 3 had left the stage. So I'm left to restate what I still want to say and have to begin with a disagreement. The idea that a person who martyrs himself and kills others in the cause of the faith will be rewarded in paradise is not a delusion of Mohammedata's. I wish it was. It would be very nice if we could say that that was the case. It is rather a belief firmly rooted in the holy book of the Muslim faith, the Quran. It is believed by an enormous number of people. It may not be disbelieved that someone who martyrs himself for the faith will be so rewarded. To do that would be to challenge the authenticity of the book, and therefore cannot be done. The most that can be done is to say that somebody interpreted this mad instruction incorrectly, but we would be living in a very happy world indeed if this was just a delusion of one leader of a 19-man gang. The same, I think, can be said of, you'll correct me, I'm sure, Shmuley, if I'm mistaken, but I think it's number 13 of the Rambam's list of articles of faith, Maimonides' opinions of what it's necessary to believe in order to be of the faithful, that there will be a resurrection. It comes just after, I think, the belief that the Messiah will come. Though, because it's Maimonides, because it's the Rambam, he does say, though he may tarry, you may not doubt that he will come, nor may you doubt that you're due another life. Now, I'm sorry. I take this stuff very seriously because I have to deal with, as I do with the Christian version of it, put so creepily and so shadily, that we bury our dead, the Christian faith, of which I'm not a member, they bury their dead in what they call, in this slightly evasive way, the sure and certain hope of resurrection. Not the sureness and the certainty of, you notice. They haven't got the arrogance for that anymore, but the sure and certain hope of resurrection. These are the beliefs on which monotheism has based itself and upon which it continues to exert its extraordinary and lethal power. And I won't take your offer Rabbi, I can't take it. I can't say all they're talking about is posthumous fame. All they're talking about is reputation. After all, people still read Shakespeare. Surely that proves that there's an afterlife. No, I'm sorry. It's a confusion of categories. It's not comparing like with like. It's not even non-overlapping magisterial. It's radically discrepant views of what reality is. And if religion would say, we don't promise you anything after death, that would be the end of it. And Shmuley would be talking ethical Judaism, and I would be saying, atheism is compatible with any belief you like. You can be an atheist and be a supporter of Ayn Rand, the most famous atheist in America. You can be an atheist and a nihilist. You can be an atheist and a fascist. All you have to do is say that you reject the supernatural dimension. But that's the most crucial thing. And now the critique of religion that we've evolved over the years in mortal combat with it is this, essentially. First, that it has a very queasy relationship with anything called evidence. That it makes very, very large claims for itself. Perhaps Rabbi Shmuley won't choose this evening to do so, but it claims to talk in terms of redemption, of salvation, and even of eternity. And there's an inverse relationship between what it claims and the amount of evidence that it can muster. And that this is its original, if you like, sin. Second, that it seems to deal in absolutes, that it appears to want us to think of a God who is in some way or another a dictator in this world, and if this one should prove disappointing, I think you used the word dress rehearsal, the term dress rehearsal, a mere ante-room. If you think this is unfair, if you think this is discrepant, if you think this is irrational, why do the evil prosper? Why do the good get trampled underfoot and left behind? Never mind. Once you've squeezed with agony through the keyhole of death, there's another whole world where all that will be put right, where every tear will be dried and every injustice compensated, which, if it was true, would be a terrible exercise in sadomasochism. Why put a bunch of rats into a labyrinth of torture? See how they do, surprise them with new rules, even bigger surprise when you squeeze them through that last gap. Now we have you, and now you're due for a verdict against which there is no appeal. If you don't believe in that as a scheme, you don't believe in God. You don't believe in the biblical promise of redemption and salvation, and you certainly don't believe in the resurrection. So I think Shmuley's word on that is that that's the case, is as good as anyone else's, and I'd say perhaps better than some. But I'm talking also to people who will be tuning into this broadcast later, and I have a captive audience, and so I've got a couple more points to make before I rest the case that you smoothed for me.
Religions promise resurrection and eternal life, but there's no evidence to support it. Science has been studying death for centuries, and every reliable study shows the same thing. When the brain dies, consciousness ends. Neuroscience confirms memory, identity, and awareness are tied to brain function. Once oxygen and blood flow stop, those processes shut down permanently. There has never been a documented reversal. Historically, claims of resurrection are rooted in tradition, not fact. Even the Bible is full of contradictions about it. Matthew 27:52-53 says saints rose from their graves when Jesus died, yet no other gospel or historian of that time mentions this extraordinary event. That silence is strong evidence it didn't happen. The Christian doctrine of the resurrection itself comes from Paul's letters, written decades after Jesus' death, not from eyewitness records. Hitchens is right. The larger the promise, the less evidence there is. And when Christians bury their dead in the sure and certain hope of resurrection, Book of Common Prayer, notice even the wording admits it's only hope, not certainty. Contrast that with what we know from science. Death is final. Religion offers eternal rewards, but it can't prove them.
That it's based on, there's another element in our critique of it, is that it's based on wishful as well as delusional thinking. Above all, wishful thinking. What is a stronger desire in the human species than that we shall conquer death? We are the only primates, as far as we know, we're the only members even of our own species, the primate species, who are fully aware of death and absolutely unreconciled to the idea of our own extinction. Even though we know our chemical composition, we know we are made out of the same elements as the rest of the cosmos. In fact, rather miraculously, if you want to call it that, we're even made out of stardust. Stars had to die for us to live. So we think it's overwhelmingly probable that when we die, our chemical ingredients will return to the natural biological and biochemical cycle, and there seems no evidence to the contrary. There may be animals who know how to fear death, but certainly no animals who know how to deny it. That's why it's so interesting that among the most frequently asked questions of people to their priests and mullahs and rabbis about the afterlife is, will my dog or cat be there too? And you notice they only ask that, will Timmy be in heaven or Rover? They never say, will that hellish tabby I once had be reassembled in the infernal regions? This is enough to show how wishful the thinking is. Now, I see that Shmuley has Dinesh's clever but, I think, thin book on the case for the afterlife in front of him. And in one debate that I had with Dinesh, he briefly gave me pause by saying, yes, wishful thinking for heaven, all right. That's hedonistic, that's a hope, that's a desire. But then why would people who were wish thinking, why would they want hell? Good point, and it tells against simple-minded Freudianism, as does a lot of other evidence. But not all of our wishes are completely transparent to us, I think, and not all of them are hedonistic, especially as they respect or regard other people. I was one of the 2 or 3 white people in the audience at Madison Square Garden in 1985 when Louis Farrakhan gave his famous address to a packed house of the Nation of Islam and addressed the Jews of the greater New York area in a taunting manner and reminded them, and I'll never forget it, he said, and remember, Jews, when God puts you in the ovens, it's forever. And I shall not soon forget the great moan and groan of pleasure that came from that audience at hearing that. And I should have been prepared for it, not just by the stupidity and nastiness and criminality on which this religious nutbag makes his living in this country. Call someone an imam or a priest or a reverend, there's nothing they can't get away with in our culture. If I could change one thing, it would be that. The second would be when someone gets up and says, I'm a person of faith, that they don't get respect for it. They think that's a respect-producing statement. I am a person of faith. You know, I'm a person who will believe practically anything on no evidence at all. Well, you said it, mister. Respect comes later. I digress. I shouldn't have been surprised by this orgy of sadism and cruelty and gloating from Farrakhan's religious audience, because I've read the Christian fathers. I've read Tertullian, who, answering some questions, one of the great fathers of the church, we see why hell is unpleasant. Why is heaven such fun? It seems to be rather dutiful. Endless praise, endless worship, endless subjection, endless tedium. You think that the Lord himself, after the first 5 billion years, would have had enough of the songs of praise. No, it's got to go on forever. Okay, where's the good bits? Tertullian says that we've thought of the good bits. In the intervals of that, you can go to the edge and you can go and look down and gloat on the torments and endless tortures of the damned. We've thought of that. Now, excuse me, that is a founding statement of Christianity. You can't disown it now. These churches wouldn't be here oppressing us. These mosques wouldn't be here incubating madmen and suicide bombers. There wouldn't be mad Jewish settlers on the West Bank thinking if we could only steal other people's land and bring on the Messiah and Armageddon, everything would be all right. There wouldn't be anything of this if it was left to the rabbi, and myself, but it's not. And Joseph Ratzinger, His Holiness the Pope, has just got off the plane in England today to announce that atheists are Nazis. An overdressed little ponce who was himself a member of the Hitler Youth dares to speak this way. He leaves the palace that quite rightly, Shmuley points out, was built on the sale of indulgences. Well, picture the church as if it had not done that. Are you talking about the same formidable multinational force? No, you're not. Have they disowned what they did? No, they haven't. Are there not still chantries all around the world where prayers are paid for and said for the souls of the dead so that there may be remission from sin, measured, by the way, in years and decades? Or, if you've paid a lot of money to a chantry, maybe centuries of remission. from sin, as if the Gregorian calendar is used for matters of eternity and infinity. The pathos, the obviousness of this fraud still goes on, and Ratzinger himself is reinstituting the idea that by making donations to the church and regular appearances at its festivals, there may be an element of remission too. And only now is it being discussed that St. Augustine's vile idea that the souls of unbaptized children may not go to hell but go to an indefinite misery of limbo until the second coming may possibly not have been the way, quite the tone of voice in which to speak to parents who'd lost their child. I'm not neutral about this. I don't think those statements are what they clearly are, man-made, silly, pathetic, mediocre, and erroneous. That is a job within the compass of anyone in this room or beyond. No, I go further. It's an evil doctrine. It's a wicked doctrine. It proceeds from people who want, quite wisely and quite shrewdly, real power over real human beings of a really absolutist sort in the only world we've got, which is the here and now. How smart they are to do it, how overdue we are to tell them that we reject this totalitarian interpretation of human life. Well, I'm not going to say why I don't think near-death experiences are impressive now. So you've spared me that, thank you. Though I wish someone would ask about them. And I think, excuse me, I think I've probably trespassed anyway on the allotted period of my time. But what I say is thanks for coming, and bring it on, and don't make me suspect that you're sparing me. Thank you.
Hitchens is right that belief in an afterlife is built on wishful thinking. Humans are the only species fully aware of their mortality, and psychology shows we create comforting myths to deny it. Ernest Becker's book, The Denial of Death, explains how cultures invent immortality stories to cope with fear. Neuroscience shows consciousness is a product of the brain, and when brain activity ends, awareness ends. There's no evidence of anything beyond. Even Christianity's picture of heaven and hell reflects human desires and fears, not reality. Early church fathers like Tertullian openly wrote that part of heaven's joy is watching the damned suffer in hell. That isn't love, it's sadism turned into doctrine. The Bible itself reinforces fear. In Matthew 25:46, Jesus says the wicked will face eternal punishment, while the righteous gain eternal life. But there's no evidence for either claim. Historically, the church monetized this fear with indulgences, literally selling forgiveness measured in years out of purgatory. That practice built St. Peter's Basilica. It's not divine truth, it's a financial racket. And science shows the opposite. When we die, our atoms return to nature. We are stardust, recycled into the universe.
All believe in it. The Talmud says that the patriarch Jacob did not die, because the Bible says he didn't die. It says Vayigva, he was elevated. So the Talmud says, Yaakov Avinu lo mes, our patriarch Jacob never died. And then it says, what do you mean he didn't die? It says he was buried. It says that Pharaoh led a giant procession with Joseph, the viceroy of Egypt, with so many kings who put their crowns on his coffin. He died. And the Talmud says no. Mazaro b'chaim, afu b'chaim. Because his children live in the example that he displayed. He has an afterlife through them. I see that with Christopher. I see it with Martin Luther King. I'm a white Jew, but his afterlife impacts me almost every day of my life, because he was the greatest American of the 20th century, because he restored us to the founding principles of this nation. And every time we want to move away from it, every time someone says something stupid and racist, stupid and too ethnic, stupid and prejudicial, we remember that he had a dream. And that dream wasn't just while he was a collection of swirling electrons and molecules. That dream transcended him, and it lives on in his afterlife. And it impacts upon us until this very day. I am not interested in heaven, and I couldn't give a damn about hell. If I'm destined to burn, then so be it. I don't want to be in some perfect place where I have nothing to contribute. In my religion and Judaism, when I go to a cemetery to pray at the graves of great people who represented a great idea, so that I'm inspired by their vision, by their dream, by their message, I am obligated to tuck in my tzitzit. I am obligated to not perform any of the Torah's commandments in their presence. The reason? Because we're not jealous of them in heaven. they're jealous of us on earth. They want to do more good deeds. They want to practice more virtue. A perfect abode in heaven is one of the worst religious ideas, even as I affirm a full belief in it. Not that I can prove it. I can't. I cannot. It's a sheer matter of faith. I reject all the silly arguments that are often offered in the name of religion. Near-death experiences, bright lights hovering above your hospital bed. I even saw this cartoon that said, it showed these surgeons who were operating on someone, and on top there was a giant sign that said, "If you can read this, you are dead." I reject near-death experiences. I don't believe they are scientifically acceptable. There's plenty of ways to explain it. Ouija boards, people who speak to the dead are all frauds to a man. I debated them on Larry King, all the people who speak to those in the afterlife, Sylvia Brown and John Edward and James Van Praagh. We were on Larry King, and I said, "Larry, this is my yarmulke, and if one of these guys can get up right now and tell us when the next IED will explode in Iraq and Afghanistan, thereby saving the life of a brave American hero, because they can communicate with the dead, they see the future, I will put salt and pepper on this yarmulke and I will eat it right here on national TV."
Shmuley admits it outright. I affirm a full belief in the afterlife. Not that I can prove it. I can't. It's a sheer matter of faith. And that's the problem. No evidence, no data, just belief. Hitchens was right. The afterlife is built on wishful thinking. It's a projection of our fear of death and our desire to live forever. Psychology confirms this in terror management theory. Humans create stories about heaven, souls, and transcendence to reduce existential anxiety. Shmuley tries to dress it up by saying Judaism's afterlife is about legacy. Jacob lives on through his children. Martin Luther King lives on through his dream. But that's not supernatural survival. That's just memory, history, and culture. Neuroscience tells us consciousness dies with the brain. Martin Luther King's speeches endure because people preserve them, not because his soul floats in another realm. And when Shmuley points to Hitler, suggesting there must be an afterlife or justice isn't real, he misses the point. Creating a cosmic torture chamber doesn't solve evil. It's just vengeance projected into eternity. Justice is a human responsibility. Courts, law, accountability here and now. Adding a mythical afterlife doesn't punish Hitler. It just consoles the living. Even his dismissal of near-death experiences shows the inconsistency. He's right, they're not evidence. But that undercuts his entire case. If faith alone is the standard, then any delusion qualifies, including the very extremist distortions he condemns. You can't reject false afterlives without evidence and then claim your own version without evidence. In the end, Hitchens' critique stands. Religions exploit humanity's fear of death, sell false promises like indulgences, and hold power over people with doctrines of heaven and hell. The truth is simpler and far more beautiful. We are stardust, and when we die, our atoms return to the universe. Our legacy lives only in what we build, the love we give, and the knowledge we pass on. That's real, verifiable, and doesn't need wishful thinking. Outro. So what do you think? Is the afterlife nothing more than a human invention to soothe our fear of death? Or do you think Shmuley is right, that there's something beyond, even if